in mind wars, not so much dealing with propaganda, because that's pretty transitory, and that is what we're trying to do. Rather, we're trying to, as I said, get at the electrochemical bases of human attitudes. You're not just doing this to what you thought were the bad guys. You're doing it to your people, too. Most of these things are very omnidirectional, and most of them cannot be stopped, because this kind of electromagnetic radiation is very, very penetrating. We are literally at the point now where scientific investigation is breaking these things down into actual parts of the electromagnetic spectrum and seeing what happens when you dose a human being, so to speak, with these areas of electromagnetic influence. Magnetism is another one of those interesting ones. Magnetic frequency, or fMRI, is now a very interesting area of research. They've been doing it at Yale and some other universities out here, and probably several over in Britain as well. And
Stanford, too, you said,
sure,
right?
And magnetism, which you normally don't think that you're subject to magnetism. You know, your body isn't built of iron or steel or anything, and you don't stick to anything when you touch a magnet. But you actually have a sensitivity to certain kinds of magnetism. You do have some magnetic materials in your body that are very fine and very delicate. These are, you might say, a sort of a human counterpart to what some birds have when they're using magnetic fields to navigate and so on. Bear in mind, of course, that we're talking again about the human body as an electromagnetic machine. And if you look at an electrical wave in the electromagnetic spectrum, you might say that it's going up and down, and what's going right and left is the magnetic wave. So for every electrical wave, there's a magnetic counterpart. And this all, not to go too far afield here, but these are the sorts of things that were getting Albert Einstein fascinated when he was trying to come up with his unified field theory, when he was trying to take all of electromagnetism and figure out that this was sort of the machinery of the entire universe, and that somewhere in here you could find things like gravity. But in any case, when you look at magnetism, you're looking at, again, a form of radiation that is different from electrical radiation, but it's still a wave phenomenon that way. And we, of course, are surrounded by it all the time. We live in a sea of this stuff. You know, we have it everywhere we go today. We're in a very electronic society. And magnetic waves and magnetic fields, of course, are much more pervasive and much harder to stop in some ways than just simple electrical broadcasts. So we, of course, are sitting on a big magnet here called the Earth, you know, which has a huge magnetic field to it. There are solar magnetic flares and so on that go on, and there's an entire interesting field of research that takes all of this discussion about climate control and relates it to switching magnetic fields that are in a constant state of flux. But bringing this down again to mind war, in about 2010, as I discovered, MIT neuroscientists discovered that application of magnetic fields to the right temporal lobe of the brain by means of non-invasive technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, can temporarily disrupt an individual's ability to make judgments based on previously learned morality. This is really quite something, because we tend to make judgments, and again, this is that pattern thinking thing. We have a moral overlay on whether we think something is good or bad from what we've learned. This is the moral decision-making process by which we judge goodness or badness in things. So you can see how important this is. Entire religions are built on the ability to proclaim what is good and bad. So if you can take an electromagnet and stick it next to somebody's head and switch it on, and suddenly you sort of poof this out of his decision-making process, you're going to have a human being who is faced with making decisions without there being any moral quality to them whatever. Now, this would be very good if you're dealing with very antagonistic moralities, like, for example, you see now with the extremism in things like Islam, where you don't want these intense moralities to govern people's decision-making. But you can also see how dangerous something like this, because morality is also the basis for our kind of underlying humanitarianism towards one another. We may have all kinds of hard and fast reasons to want to exploit other human beings or do things with them or to them. But it's our morality that sort of holds this in check and says, well, you can or can't do this because it's not nice and it's not human and it's not compassionate and it's not moral. So what we have got here is a very double-edged kind of sword in this new magnetic technology. This field, generally, if you want to look for it, if your listeners want to look for it, look up functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI.